Ji-hoon is the silent reaper of Seoul's underground, a man feared by everyone, but intimately alive to no one. For 5 years, following a psychological trauma, he has been trapped in a frozen existence, incapable of desire, warmth, or physical response. But his immunity is about to expire. The Han Council has issued a final ultimatum: produce a wife within 30 days to secure the bloodline, or forfeit his empire to his ambitious and treacherous cousin, Min-jae. In the shadows of the same city, Emily Ross is hiding in plain sight. Fleeing an abusive past in Paris, she has reinvented herself as a waitress in Seoul's most exclusive lounge. She is a striking contrast to her surroundings, her deep, rich skin glowing under the warm ambient lights, her sleek, high ponytail swinging with disciplined elegance, and bold gold hoop earrings signaling a confidence that belies her service role. Then comes the moment that defies medical science. Ji-hoon sits in the lounge, resigned to his numbness. Emily approaches, balancing a glass of amber-colored liquor on a polished tray. She doesn't just serve him, she leans in, invading his personal space with a quiet, dominant intensity. As her lips hover inches from his ear and her scent envelops him, Ji-hoon's eyes go wide in genuine shock. His heart hammers against his ribs, and for the first time in 1,825 days, a violent, undeniable heat floods his veins. The beast isn't just awake, it is starving. Before we step into the VIP lounge and witness the moment that changes the Seoul underground forever, I want to welcome you to the family. I'm curious to see how far our influence reaches. Drop a comment below telling me which city you're tuning in from. Now, pour yourself a drink and get comfortable. The beast is about to wake up.
The VIP section of the Obsidian Lounge was a tomb of velvet and shadow, exactly how Han Ji-hoon preferred it. 5 years. That's how long it had been since his body had registered anything other than the cold recoil of a gun or the dull throb of a migraine. The council's ultimatum rang in his ears: 30 days, or the empire burns. He stared at the empty crystal glass, his reflection pale, youthful, yet hauntingly hollow. He was a king with a frozen crown, resigned to the numbness that had become his only armor. Then, the air shifted. It wasn't a sound, but a displacement of energy that made the hair on his arms stand up. She moved through the dim light like smoke, commanding the space rather than merely occupying it. A waitress, technically, but everything about her screamed royalty. Her skin was deep, rich ebony, glowing under the warm amber sconces, a stark, beautiful contrast to the sterile pallor of the women the council usually paraded before him. A sleek, high ponytail cascaded down her back, swaying with a disciplined rhythm, and large gold hoop earrings caught the light, framing high cheekbones that looked sharp enough to cut. Ji-hoon watched, his breath hitching in a throat that hadn't been tight in half a decade. She didn't look down, she looked through the room. She approached his booth, not with the trembling subservience he was used to from the staff, but with a terrifying, quiet confidence. A name badge on her fitted black top read Emily, a mundane label for a woman who looked like a deity in service clothing. In one steady hand, she balanced a polished silver tray, holding a single glass of amber liquid. She didn't set it down immediately. Instead, she stepped into his personal space, invading the invisible barrier that usually kept the world at bay. She leaned in. The scent hit him first. Vanilla and something darker, like burnt sugar and rain. She placed the glass down, her arm brushing the air beside his shoulder, her movement deliberate and slow. Her face was inches from his, her full lips poised near his ear as if she held a secret that could ruin him. The proximity was suffocating in the most intoxicating way. Ji-hoon froze, his hands gripping the leather seat. His eyes went wide, unfocused and stunned, caught off guard by the sheer audacity of her closeness. The visual contrast was jarring, her warm, dark radiance overwhelming his cold, pale isolation. A spark, violent and electric, arced through his spine. It wasn't just surprise, it was a physical assault on his nervous system. His heart hammered against his ribs,
a frantic, thundering rhythm he had forgotten he possessed. She pulled back slowly, her dark eyes locking onto his with a look of controlled seduction and calm authority. She knew. She had to know. Ji-hoon sat paralyzed, his chest heaving as he watched her walk away. The ice in his veins didn't just melt, it evaporated instantly. The beast, starved and dormant for 5 years, didn't just wake up, it roared.
The next night, the air in the Obsidian Lounge felt heavier, charged with the static of a coming storm. Ji-hoon sat in the same booth, but the hollow resignation of the previous evening was gone, replaced by a predatory stillness. He hadn't slept. The ghost of her scent, vanilla and burnt sugar, had haunted the sterile silence of his penthouse until he felt like he was suffocating. He needed another hit. When the floor manager tried to send a different server, Ji-hoon didn't even speak. He simply lifted a finger, and his bodyguard, Lee Se-yoon, whispered a sharp correction into the manager's ear. Moments later, the replacement vanished, and Emily appeared. She moved toward him, her expression unreadable, though her grip on the serving tray was tighter than before. She wore the same fitted black uniform, the gold hoops catching the low light, but there was a flicker of caution in her dark eyes now. She sensed the shift in him. The vulnerable man from last night had been replaced by the king. "Mr. Han," she said, her voice a low, smooth alto that vibrated in his chest. "I didn't expect to see you so soon." "Sit," Ji-hoon commanded. It wasn't a request. Emily hesitated, glancing at the surrounding tables, then set her tray down and slid into the booth opposite him. She maintained her composure, her posture regal, but the air between them crackled with unsaid words. Ji-hoon slid a thin manila envelope across the polished mahogany table. "I don't want a drink, Emily. I want to buy out your contract." Her brows knit together, the first crack in her armor. "Excuse me?" "Your debt," he clarified, his gaze dropping to the pulse fluttering in her throat. "The loans you took to get away from Paris, the crushing interest rates that keep you working double shifts here. I've bought it all." Emily went still, her eyes narrowing into dangerous slits. "Who do you think you are?" "A man who is tired of waiting." He leaned forward, matching the intimacy she had forced on him the night before. "I am offering you a position, private service, my penthouse. You serve only me. In exchange, the debt is wiped clean, and you receive a salary that will make you untouchable." She opened the folder, scanning the single sheet of paper. Her eyes widened slightly at the figure, but she didn't gasp. She looked up, studying him, the manic intensity in his pupils, the desperate set of his jaw. He looked like a man on the edge of starvation, and she was the only sustenance in sight. It was a trap, golden and terrifying, but it was also an escape. "And if I say no," she challenged, her voice steady, "then you walk away with your debt," Ji-hoon said softly. "But you won't, because you're curious. You want to know why a man who owns half the city is looking at you like you're the only oxygen in the room." Emily held his gaze for a long, silent beat. The danger was palpable, but so was the pull, a magnetic force she couldn't explain. She pulled a pen from her apron, signed the paper with a flourish, and slid it back. "When do I start?" "Now."
The penthouse was a glass coffin suspended over Seoul, a monument to silence and sterility. For 3 days, Emily Ross had been the only splash of color in Ji-hoon's monochrome world. He sat at his sprawling ebony desk, ostensibly reading syndicate reports, but his eyes never left her. He was dissecting her, analyzing every shift of her hips, every toss of her heavy braid, trying to isolate the variable. Was it the scent? The visual contrast? He treated her like a volatile chemical, demanding she pour his scotch from the left, then the right, testing the proximity like a scientist searching for a cure. "Stop staring at me like I'm a lab rat," Emily snapped, shattering the silence. She stood by the wet bar, her posture rigid, the crystal decanter hitting the counter with a little too much force. Ji-hoon didn't blink. "You are paid to be observed, Emily. You are paid to exist in my space." "I'm paid to serve drinks, not to be your doll," she countered, turning to face him. Her eyes were dark fire, burning with a defiance that no one in the Han Syndicate would dare show. "If you want a mannequin, go buy one. I hear they're quieter and don't require health insurance." Her insolence was a splash of gasoline on a smoldering fire.
The defiance didn't repel him, it hooked into the dark, starving part of his brain. He stood up, the chair scraping harsh against the marble floor. He crossed the room, the predator stalking its prey, until he loomed over her. "Careful," he warned, his voice a low rumble that vibrated in the small space between them. "You forget who holds the leash." "I see a man holding a leash," Emily said, tilting her chin up, refusing to cower even as he towered over her. "But I don't see a dog." The challenge hung in the air, sharp and dangerous. Ji-hoon reached out, intending to intimidate, to remind her of the hierarchy. His hand shot out, his fingers wrapping around her bare forearm to pin her in place. Skin met skin. The world didn't just stop, it imploded. A shockwave of pure, unadulterated sensation tore up his arm, slamming into his chest with the force of a freight train. It wasn't just heat, it was a sensory overload so violent his vision blurred. The numbness that had encased him for 5 years shattered into a million jagged pieces, replaced by a rushing, roaring awareness of every nerve ending in his body. He gasped, the air leaving his lungs in a ragged rush. His grip tightened involuntarily, not out of aggression, but desperation. He looked down at where his pale fingers dug into her warm, dark skin, and for the first time in forever, he felt everything.
The bubble of the penthouse had to burst eventually. Ji-hoon insisted on escorting Emily to her mandatory wardrobe fitting, a thinly veiled excuse to keep her within his sightline. As they exited the private elevator into the marble lobby, the air changed. Emily. The name was spoken with a French inflection, smooth as oil and twice as slick. Emily stopped dead. The color drained from her face, turning her radiant skin ashen. The confident, lioness-like posture she wore like armor disintegrated instantly, replaced by a trembling, terrified girl. A man stepped out from behind a pillar. Julian Moreau. He was handsome in a cruel, sharp way, wearing a suit that cost more than Emily's life earnings. "I told you," Julian smiled, stepping closer, ignoring Ji-hoon entirely. "You can run to the other side of the world, my chérie, but you belong to me." He reached out, his hand snatching her wrist, the same wrist Ji-hoon had held the night before. But where Ji-hoon's touch had been a desperate anchor, Julian's was a shackle. Emily didn't pull away. She flinched, a visceral, conditioned response that made something dark and ancient snap inside Ji-hoon's chest. The silent reaper didn't shout, he didn't posture, he simply moved. Before Julian could tighten his grip, Ji-hoon was there. He seized Julian's wrist with a speed that blurred the air, twisting it backward with a sickening crack. Julian screamed, dropping to his knees as the bones in his forearms snapped under the calculated pressure. The lobby security took a collective step back, recognizing the shift in their boss's demeanor. This wasn't business. This was execution. Ji-hoon didn't let go. He forced Julian's face into the cold marble floor, leaning down to whisper in his ear, his voice devoid of humanity. "You touched what is mine," Ji-hoon said, the words falling like stones into deep water. "That hand will never hold anything again. If I see you in Seoul after sunset, I will take the other one. Then your eyes." He released the sobbing man as if he were garbage. Lee Se-jun materialized from the shadows, hauling Julian up and dragging him towards the exit without a word. The silence that followed was deafening. Ji-hoon turned to Emily. She was shaking, staring at the spot where Julian had been, her breath coming in shallow gasps. She looked shattered, the cracks in her composure wide open. He stepped into her space, blocking the view of the door, blocking the world. He didn't touch her. Not yet. He just let his shadow consume her, offering the only thing he knew how to give. Absolute, terrifying control. "He is gone," Ji-hoon said, his voice dropping to a rumble that was meant only for her. "You are in the lion's den now, Emily. Nothing touches you, unless I allow it." For the first time, she didn't look at him like a monster. She looked at him like he was the wall standing between her and the abyss.
The summons from the Han Council was not an invitation, it was a subpoena.
They demanded to inspect the foreign distraction who had reportedly turned the Silent Reaper into a brawler in a hotel lobby. Ji-hoon adjusted his cufflinks in the backseat of the limousine, his jaw set in a line of grim anticipation. He had dressed Emily in emerald silk that clung to her curves like a second skin, but he feared he was leading a lamb to the slaughter. "They will try to break you," he murmured, refusing to look at her, because looking at her made his focus fracture. "They will mock your background. They will speak in riddles." "Ji-hoon," Emily said, her voice cool and steady. She reached out, adjusting his tie with a familiarity that made his pulse spike. "I spent 5 years serving men who think they own the world. I know how to handle sharks. I just have to make sure they're well fed." When the doors to the grand hall opened, the silence was absolute. The air was thick with judgment and the scent of expensive cigars. 50 pairs of eyes, the elite of the underworld, locked onto them. Min-jae stood near the bar, a flute of champagne in hand, his smile sharp and waiting for the inevitable disaster. Elder Park, the oldest and most vicious of the council, stepped forward. He looked Emily up and down with undisguised disdain. "So," the elder croaked, switching to English to ensure the insult landed. "This is the help. Tell me, girl, do you know which fork to use, or should we ask the kitchen for a spoon?" The room tittered nervously. Min-jae's grin widened. Emily didn't flinch. She didn't even blink. Instead, she smiled, a slow, terrifying expression that mirrored the one she'd worn in the lounge. She stepped away from Ji-hoon's protective shadow and walked toward the table where Elder Park had been sitting. "I believe," she said, her voice projecting effortlessly, "that for a vintage like the 1982 Chateau Margaux you are drinking, the glass should be held by the stem, not the bowl, Elder Park. The heat from your hand ruins the bouquet." She picked up the decanter with graceful precision, pouring a fresh glass. She moved with the fluid, hypnotic rhythm of a master orchestrating a symphony. She placed the glass down, not as a servant, but as a queen offering a favor. "And regarding the cutlery," she continued, leaning in just enough to unsettle him, invading his space as she had Ji-hoon's. "I know exactly which knife to use. I also know that a man of your stature shouldn't have a stain on his lapel. It projects carelessness." She brushed an invisible speck of dust from his shoulder. Elder Park froze. The room went deadly silent. She hadn't just corrected him, she had dismantled his authority with perfect etiquette. "Charmed," Elder Park muttered, flustered, lifting the glass by the stem. Ji-hoon watched, awe warring with arousal. She wasn't a victim, she was a lioness walking among wolves, and for the first time, the wolves looked nervous. In the corner, Min-jae's glass shattered in his grip, his hatred burning brighter than ever.
The pain in Julianne's arm was a living thing, a throbbing reminder of his humiliation in the lobby. He sat in the back of a dimly lit, nondescript sedan parked near the Han River, cradling his cast against his chest. When the door opened, the damp city air rushed in, followed by the sharp scent of expensive cologne. Han Min-jae slid into the seat, his smile tight and devoid of warmth. He didn't look at Julianne. He looked at the rain streaking the tinted window. "My cousin has a heavy hand," Min-jae noted, his voice smooth. "And the woman, she has a sharp tongue. They make quite a pair, don't they? Breaking bones and egos alike." Julianne grit his teeth, the shame burning hotter than the fracture. "I want her back, and I want him dead." "Dead is messy. Dead makes him a martyr," Min-jae corrected, finally turning to face the Frenchman. "Ruined is better. We don't just kill the king. We prove he was sleeping with a traitor. That destroys his legacy." Min-jae snapped his fingers, and his driver passed a sleek black tablet to the back seat. On the screen was a bank transfer interface, already populated with data. A massive sum, 50 million won, routed from a shell company known to be a front for the Viper Syndicate, the Han family's bloodiest rivals. The recipient account bore Emily's name. "I need her old passwords," Min-jae said, the request sounding like a command. "Email, cloud storage, banking. I need to make this transfer look like she solicited it. I need to plant the digital breadcrumbs that show she's been selling our trade routes to the Vipers since the moment she arrived." Julianne hesitated for only a fraction of a second before typing the codes into the tablet. Betrayal came easy to him. It was the only currency he had left. "Good," Min-jae purred. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a tiny silver disc,
no larger than a button. One of the housekeepers in the penthouse is on my payroll. She tells me the girl leaves her purse unattended in the foyer. He pressed the device into Julianne's good hand. Though the act was symbolic, the maid would do the work, but Min-jae wanted Julianne to feel complicit. This goes into the lining of her bag. It will transmit proof of her recording Ji-hoon's private meetings, Min-jae explained. By tomorrow morning, the narrative will be set. The beautiful waitress wasn't a muse, Julianne. She was a corporate spy sent by our enemies to seduce a mentally unstable leader. Min-jae leaned back, watching the data upload on the tablet, the green progress bar sealing Emily's fate. Ji-hoon thinks he found a queen. We're going to show him he's been sleeping with a snake. And by the time the council is done with her, there won't be enough left for you to take back to Paris. Julianne stared at the screen, a cruel smile finally touching his lips. Do it.
The silence in the penthouse office was a physical weight, crushing the air out of the room. Lee Seo-jun stood by the desk, his face grim, a tiny silver listening device and a tablet laid out on the ebony surface like instruments of torture. It was sewn into the lining of her purse, Seo-jun said, his voice devoid of his usual loyalty. And the transfer hit her account an hour ago. 50 million won. Source, Viper Syndicate Shell Corp. Ji-hoon stared at the evidence, his world tilting on its axis. The device, the money. It was a perfect picture of treason. The beast inside him, usually so loud and demanding, curled up and died, replaced by a cold, jagged shard of agony. He wanted to scream, to smash the glass walls, to shoot the messenger, but he just sat there, the numbness returning, not as a shield, but as a shroud. The door opened. Emily walked in, her smile hesitant but warm, carrying a tray of tea. She stopped when she saw Seo-jun's hand hovering near his holster. She looked at Ji-hoon, and the warmth died in her eyes. What's wrong? Ji-hoon stood up, picking up the silver bug. He tossed it across the desk. It skittered to a stop at her feet. How long? Emily looked down, confusion knitting her brow. What is that? Don't, Ji-hoon whispered, the sound raw. He turned the tablet around, showing the damning bank transfer. 50 million. Is that what I'm worth? The Vipers paid you to warm my bed and record my meetings? I don't know what this is, Emily stammered, stepping forward, her hands shaking. Ji-hoon, look at me. I would never. Protocol demands execution for spies, Seo-jun interrupted, drawing his weapon. The click of the safety disengaging echoed like a gunshot. Ji-hoon looked at his enforcer, then at the woman who had brought him back to life. He saw the terror in her eyes, the genuine confusion. A part of him, the foolish, human part, screamed that she was innocent, but the council would not care about intuition. If she stayed in this room for another minute, Seo-jun would put a bullet in her head. It was the law of the blood. To save her, he had to destroy her. Ji-hoon's face hardened into a mask of cruel indifference. He laughed, a harsh, brittle sound. Put the gun away, Seo-jun. She's not a spy. She's just a whore who got greedy. Emily flinched as if he had struck her. Ji-hoon, you played the role well, he sneered, walking around the desk to loom over her, using his height to intimidate, to push her away. The defiant waitress, the lioness. I almost believed it. But you're just a street rat looking for a payout. That's a lie, she whispered, tears spilling over. You know who I am. I know you were a distraction, he roared, grabbing her arm, not with the electric tenderness of before, but with a shove toward the door. And now I'm bored. Get out. Ji-hoon, please. Get her out of my sight, he bellowed at the guards by the door. Throw her on the street. If she returns, kill her. As the guards dragged a sobbing, shattered Emily away, Ji-hoon turned his back to the door, staring out at the city lights until his reflection blurred, his hands clenched so tight his knuckles turned white. He had saved her life, but he had just killed the only part of himself that mattered.
The Seoul rain was unforgiving, soaking through the emerald silk of Emily's gown until it clung to her skin like a freezing shroud. She sat on the curb outside the penthouse complex, shivering, the mud staining the hem of a dress that cost more than her life. Ji-hoon's words, street rat, whore, burned in her chest, hotter than the cold biting her skin. But as the shock wore off, the steel that had carried her from Paris to Seoul re-emerged. She wasn't a victim. She had survived Julian once. She would not let him bury her now. She ripped open her clutch, staring at the torn lining where the bug had been. It was clumsy work.
but it was the bank transfer notification on her phone that stopped her breath. To bypass the two-factor authentication on her old account, one would need the answers to her security questions. What was the name of your first pet? Where did you meet your spouse? Only one person knew those answers. She hadn't written them down. She had whispered them to Julien 3 years ago, in a bed in Montmartre, when she still thought he loved her. "You sloppy bastard," she hissed, wiping the rain and tears from her eyes. She fumbled for the business card Lee Seo-jun had given her weeks ago during her security clearance. Her hands shook as she dialed. "You are lucky I am still in the building." Seo-jun's voice was a low growl. "And you are lucky I haven't come down there to finish the job." "Ask yourself something, Seo-jun," Emily said, her voice cutting through the static of the rain. "The bank transfer required security answers. Old ones. Answers I never wrote down. How did the Vipers get them? Or did they come from the man whose arm Ji-hoon broke yesterday?" Silence on the line. Then, "Stay where you are." When the black sedan pulled up, Seo-jun didn't unlock the door immediately. He rolled down the window, his eyes searching hers for deceit. "The boss is tearing his office apart. If this is a game, Emily, you won't survive the night." "It's not a game. Take me to Julien." They found the Frenchman in a mid-tier hotel, nursing a bottle of brandy and his cast. He didn't hear the lockpick click. He only looked up when the door swung open, revealing Emily, drenched, ruined, and terrifying, flanked by the grim shadow of the enforcer. "Emily," Julien scrambled back on the bed. "The transfer came from this location," Lee Seo-jun lied smoothly, leveling his silenced pistol at Julien's chest. "We have the IP address. It matches the Wi-Fi in this room." It was a bluff, but Julien, fueled by pain medication and fear, crumbled instantly. "It wasn't my idea," Julien screamed, holding up his good hand. "Min-jae. It was Min-jae. He gave me the device. He told me the codes. I have the messages. Don't shoot." Seo-jun lowered the gun, pulling out a recorder. He looked at Emily, a rare flicker of respect in his eyes. "Start talking," Emily commanded, stepping into the room. "And don't leave out a single word."
The Han family compound smelled of incense and ancient treachery. Ji-hoon stood before the council, a hollowed-out husk of a king, listening as Min-jae paced the floor. "It brings me no joy to accept this burden," Min-jae lied, his voice thick with false solemnity. "But my cousin has proven unstable, compromised by a foreign agent. The lineage must be preserved." Ji-hoon didn't argue. He had nothing left to defend. Then the heavy oak doors groaned open. The silence that followed was sharper than a blade. Emily Ross walked in. She was still wearing the ruined emerald silk, mud drying on the hem, her hair wild from the rain. But she didn't look like a victim. She looked like an executioner. Seo-jun flanked her, holding a tablet high. "The spy has a statement," the enforcer announced, his voice booming off the stone walls. Before Min-jae could protest, the recording began. Julian's terrified voice filled the hall, spilling every detail of the plot: the forged transfer, the listening device, the 50 million won payout from Min-jae. Min-jae froze, his face draining of color. He turned to the elders, stammering, "It's a fabrication, a trick." Ji-hoon looked at Emily. She met his gaze across the room, her chin lifted in that familiar, defiant tilt. "I am here," her eyes said. "I am true." The beast inside Ji-hoon didn't just roar, it broke the chain. He crossed the room in a blur of motion. Min-jae didn't even have time to scream before Ji-hoon's hand clamped around his throat, lifting him off his feet. "You tried to kill her," Ji-hoon whispered, the sound terrifying the elders more than a shout ever could. "You tried to take the only light I have found in 5 years." He threw Min-jae against the ancestral shrine, the wood splintering under the force. Ji-hoon rained blows down on his cousin, unleashing years of cold fury in a storm of calculated violence, until Seo-jun gently touched his shoulder. "Boss, he's done. It's over." Ji-hoon stood, chest heaving, straightening his suit. He stepped over his cousin's unconscious body and walked straight to Emily. He didn't ask the council for permission. He simply took her hand and led her out of the darkness. Later, on the penthouse balcony, the chaos of the underworld felt miles away.
The city of Seoul sprawled beneath them, a galaxy of electric starlight. Ji-hoon stood behind her, wrapping his arms around her waist, burying his face in the crook of her neck, where the scent of vanilla and rain still lingered. He felt her heart beating against his forearm, steady, strong, real. "I thought I lost you," he murmured against her skin. "You almost did," Emily replied softly, leaning back into him. "But I don't give up easily on things that matter." He turned her in his arms. The city lights reflected in the gold of her hoop earrings, illuminating the warmth in her dark eyes. The ice was gone forever. "I love you," Ji-hoon said, the words tasting like freedom. "You woke me up, Emily. I am never going back to sleep." She smiled, pulling him down for a kiss that promised forever. "Good, because I'm just getting started with you." The file on Han Ji-hoon is officially closed, but your role here isn't done. Thank you for surviving the crossfire with me until the very end. If Emily's fire warmed you, hit that subscribe button and leave a like to secure your spot in the family. Tell me in the comments, would you have forgiven him in the warehouse? I read every whisper. Stay sharp. The next secret is already being declassified.